And hello, everyone. Happy Friday, wherever you find yourself today. This is Coach Elex, and this is Get a Grip with Coach Elex. I am super excited to be here with you, coming live from Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and enjoying an amazing, gorgeous, what we call fall day here. And with me to make it even more amazing and more gorgeous is my co-host, the one and only
Stephen the medium, and good afternoon and welcome autumn. It's September, summer's good. Summer's done.
Steven's been waiting for this day for the last several weeks. True?
That is true. Several weeks. I was waiting for it last winter.
Well, except that, this is our first summer in our new home in Cape Cod, so it's been fun.
It has. It definitely
to be
has.
here for the summer and to experience what this is like. And every day, it's a new day for us here. So I would say it's been fun. It wasn't fun the couple of days that we got so much heat and that it was sort of hard to be around. But
it still wasn't as bad.
No. It's always 10 degrees, cooler here?
Yeah, it wasn't as bad, but it was, there were a couple of days that it was really even warm down here.
Yeah, but I can smell fall. I can smell pumpkins,
Yes.
apples in the air, and we have lots of witches, right, Stephen?
You mean like neighbors?
No, no. Tell people why. Like, what is it about Halloween that's so important to you? Well, to both of us.
Well, it's because we both love Halloween and love decorating the house, and we go all out decorating the house for Halloween. And last year we weren't able to do that because we were right in the midst of the move. So, we certainly, as we were throwing things out and purging and packing things up, there was no way we could put stuff up for Halloween. So this is going to be a biggie.
Yes, it will be. And, if you doubt what we're telling you, we'll post a picture when we're starting to take things out. I will tell you, a few years ago, Steven took a picture of all of our Halloween stuff and he put it in our dining room. And somebody, or many people, thought that we were at a store. Because it looked like you were in a store and you were surrounded by Halloween stuff, fall stuff, and that's no joke. That's the truth.
And there's even more, Elix. There's even more from 2 years ago. And that's what I usually do. I usually take I call it inventory. Anyone who knows me keeps asking me, when's inventory starting? So yeah. I pull everything out, and because the witches and everything else that's in the bins, they have to breathe. They've been waiting a year and now they've been waiting 2 years. So they're really excited that they're coming out. And the great thing is, it looks just like Christmas, is that seeing this is our first Halloween here, that we also get to select places to put all these decorations. We do them for 15 years in Norton, and it gets to a place that I would pull the decorations out and know automatically what goes where. And now this is like Virgin Witches this year. Yeah. Like, we don't know where we're going to put them.
And talking about where we're going to put places, we also have been very busy getting our house painted. Not that we're busy doing the painting because we have a crew painting our house, but it's chaotic here, but it also looks spectacular. So I can only imagine what our home is going to look like once it's fully decorated, right?
It already looks like a new home. It looks like just a brand new home. Paint is amazing.
Paint is unbelievable. And talking about Halloween, I know that you got something exciting coming up. So want to tell people about it? Yeah, we'll remind them at the end, but might as well.
Yeah, well, I have not even made an announcement, but I am so excited about these two events I'm going to be doing in October. So October 28th, I am going to be doing a live event in Canton, Massachusetts. And this will be coming up on my website, so you can purchase tickets. And it is going to be a Halloween event, so that I am opening up that people can dress up in costumes, because I think this is going to be really cool. And it's going to be a Halloween party with me doing readings in spirit and doing notes, but being able to, you don't have to, but being able to dress up. We're going to do a best costume contest, and whoever wins that is going to get a free reading. So it's going to be pretty great. And on the same token, I'm going to do the same thing, only virtually, on Halloween, on October 31st, which will be like a Sunday evening, which I did last year, and it was so cool. And I'm so excited about it. But I'm really excited about both events, because how can you beat Halloween? I said to Lindsay, who does all our work and is fabulous, that it's a time that it's the only time that adults are free to dress up, whatever way they want to dress up. So how do you not love that?
Well, talking about that, I mean, you and I were having a conversation. What's the meaning, or what was the original meaning of Halloween?
Well, the original meaning was on that day, on Halloween, was to talk to your loved ones who had crossed over. That's the original meaning.
Yeah. So there's this is the perfect occasion to have an event and have people have the opportunity to connect with their loved ones.
Yes. And it's Halloween. How exciting is that going to be?
That's super exciting. So how could they find out more information, Stephen?
As soon as it comes up on my website. So Lindsay is working on it as we speak, so it should be coming up soon.
And your website is simplestephenthemedium.com.
Everything is Stephen the Medium.
Everything. So you have no excuse whatsoever. So now, the other thing that I want to sort of share with people is my mother has a big birthday tomorrow.
Yay!
My mother is turning 96. Can you believe it, Stephen?
No.
And she looks amazing. And she feels amazing, thank God. She's doing amazing. In fact, the other day we had an appointment with the doctor, and she turns to me and she says, "Well, I guess I'm going to be around for a long time." And I'm looking at her, I'm like, "Well, lucky me, mother." And she laughed, and I laughed. I sort of laughed. No, but I love having her here. And so we're going to take her out. We're going to surprise her, and we're going to take her out to one of her favorite places and sing happy birthday to her.
Well, one of all three of us favorite places.
That's right. One of our favorite places. And then tomorrow we also have, we're seeing our best friends and the entire family, the Barcharders. So we'll have an opportunity to sing happy birthday to her during that event. So I think
Elix, I never, not to interrupt you, but I don't think of her age, your mother's age, because I see her every day, and it just, I guess maybe because it doesn't sort of reconcile that how can this woman be going on 96? So I never really think about the number, because she's just so, she's mobile, she's alert, she's coherent, her memory's better than most people's. It's just crazy.
Yeah, well, I think that sort of highlights that sometimes age is just a number. It's all in how you feel. It's all in how you act. I mean, Stephen, you've experienced it, have experienced it first time many times. My mother is unstoppable. Yes. Like if we're doing anything and we say you want to come, does she ever say no? No, she always says, yes, I'm going to do it. And even when it requires lots of walking, I'll take my walker. And even when she takes the walker, she still insists on walking and doing whatever she needs to do. And I think that's and she's also super creative and always working on craft projects.
Always.
Like Steven not long ago gave her a little present of a Christmas tree because, we're thinking about, Christmas, and I know she loves decorating too. And it was a beautiful, tiny little tree with ornaments. And the following day, she just says, "Oh, let me show you what I did." And she had little tiny presents under the tree. And they, they,
That
they
that was
looked,
that's just that was I mean because it's a little glass Christmas tree that you hang the little ornaments on, and I thought it was darling. I thought it was adorable, and I just thought we were in Falmouth, we were in a store, and I just said I got to get this for Consuelo, and it's what about like 6 inches, 7 inches
yeah,
tall. I mean, it's small, and the fact that she and I said to Elix, the thing that amazes me about this is that she not only made little presents because she set it up and put the little presents. I think there's three of them under the tree. The presents are proportionate to just like a person's Christmas tree.
I
They're like
know.
underneath the tree. They when you look at it, it looks exactly like if you looked at a regular tree with Christmas presents underneath it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So, I'm looking at the time. I think we are heading to take our first break. But before that, I wanted just to, remind people that today's conversation is going to be an awesome conversation about, being addicted to being right. So, the question for you is your brain addicted to being right? And if you're one of those individuals who just loves being right all the time, but you've noticed that with that comes a lot of conflict. You may be in conflicts with your colleagues. You may be in conflict with the people that work with you. You may be in conflict with the people that you love, your husband, your wife, your children. You may want to really listen to this conversation because we're going to explore why that happens, how it happens, and how you can transform it. So, if you think you have a little bit of an addiction to being right, I know for a fact that I feel like I want to be right. And I've learned to recognize it and I've learned to shift it because it doesn't serve me. So that's what we're going to talk about. What do you think about that, Stephen?
I think I don't have that affliction, and I am right.
Oh yes, yeah. We'll have a whole show about Stephen's addiction to being right. So with that said, I think we are going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll dive into, you know, is your brain addicted to being right? And if you want to join the conversation, you can always do so at 508-222-1320. We'll be right back. And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Elix. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day and getting prepared to celebrate, if you live in the United States, Labor Day weekend. We are. And I'm here with my co host,
Stephen, the medium, is here in the house.
Stephen, the medium, is in the house. And today we are talking about addiction to being right. Are you addicted to being right? Is your brain addicted to being right? So this is a really amazing conversation because most of us are addicted to being right, but most of us don't recognize it, don't know that we're addicted to being right. We just like to be right. So what I want to start is I want to explore the conversation, explore a couple of ways. So, of why this happens, how this happens, and how we can change or transform it. One of the ways, one of the things that I want to explore is the neuroscience. And of course, this brings me to the conversation to Judith Glaser, who's an amazing mentor of mine. Judith is the founder of Conversational Intelligence. She wrote the book Conversational Intelligence, and also the founder of Benchmark Communications. And Judy passed away 2 years ago of pancreatic cancer, but she was an amazing woman. I love and adore her. She taught me so much about the neuroscience of the brain, and there's a whole lot that happens when you're right, and a whole lot that has to do with how our brain responds and why it feels so good to want to be right, all the time. The second thing that I want to explore is also comes from, believe it or not, the study of ontology, the distinction, what it's called the distinction rackets, and I'm gonna quote, a section of one of my favorite books, The Three Laws of Performance by Steve Safran and Dave Logan. These are people that I also view with very high regards. I did a whole lot of training, of ontology, and both of these things can provide a great opening for every single one of us to better understand where that desire of wanting to be right comes from, how to recognize it, because when you learn how to recognize it is when it creates that opening to transform it, to change it. Otherwise, it remains in the unknown, the things that you don't know, those blind spots that we talk about so frequently here on this radio show. So, when you're in an argument and you prove the other person wrong, why does it feel so good? Why does it feel so good? Stephen, why does it feel so good to you when you get to prove, come on, you went to school so that you could professionally prove others wrong. Why do you think it feels so good, Stephen?
I think it has a different feeling depending on what the circumstances are. I mean, if I'm in court, which I've done many, many, many times because I'm always right in court. When I'm representing, what comes to mind is kids. Yep. And, I just remember, arguing to get custody back from the state back to the mom. And, I certainly put a lot of time into the argument, and at the end of the day, the judge sided with me and gave custody back to mom. And I remember walking out, and of course it's lingo mumbo jumbo, like the law lingo that's in court. A lot of adults can't understand it, never mind kids. So when we walked out, I walked out with my client and his mom, and he was crying. And I said, "What are you crying for?" And he said, because I'm not going back. I'm like, because he didn't understand that the custody order was revoked. And I said, no, it was removed. It was taken away. You're going back to your mom. And this 12-year-old just hugged me, this boy crying. And so that made me feel so good because I helped. I helped this mom, I helped this little boy, and keeping, the dynamics back with, for them to learn together. So I guess it depends on the situation, right?
Yeah, and actually, you bring a great point, Stephen. This conversation, it should never be heard as absolute, like, being right is wrong. There's many times where being right is actually perfectly okay. It's right.
I love
It's
that.
when you get addicted to a position that you want to be right regardless. That's when it can become problematic. Now, Judith Glaser, again, the founder of Conversational Intelligence, reminded us that just like other addictions, being hooked on needing to be right is based on a chemical response in our brains. So that's part of why sometimes we get so hooked with that need to be right no matter what. Now, in your case, of course, you are advocating for the well being of these children. So you want to be right in this case because their well being is in your hands. But in many cases, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we sort of dive deeper in the conversation, that may not be the case. Now, when we are wedded to our point of view and feel powerfully right, we lack the perspective to connect to others and to realize they see and experience the world differently. And that's what you want to sort of keep in the background, keep in mind. You don't want to be wedded to that point of view so that you can feel powerfully right over others. Now, as leaders in our community, workplaces, homes, churches, or wherever it is that you find yourself, being a leader, it is up to us to consciously manage the potential for a rightness addiction. Again, doesn't mean that if you're advocating for a position that is in the best interest of someone else, that's not okay. That's perfectly fine. And it's up to you. I don't know the circumstances. I certainly don't know everyone's circumstances, but it's up to you to gain a sense of awareness. And this is what these conversations are all about, is to sort of create awareness, to sort of learn, for all of us to learn to discover those things that we just don't know. They're unknown, and they're unknown to us. And when you discover them, then you have them, you put them on the table, and then you have the opportunity to choose, to respond. When you don't know, and it's a blind spot, you don't get to choose anything. Whatever the circumstances are, they choose you. And by the way, I've coached many incredibly successful people, leaders, CEOs, entrepreneurs who suffer from the addiction of being right. Stephen, what are you hearing here so far?
A lot. I mean, there's a lot. Well, it also it reminds me, or maybe even tells me, just the complexities of this addiction to being right. That it's, I never until you just also talked about that sometimes it's okay, or it's right to be right if you're doing something like my example, and there's a lot of levels to this.
Yeah. Excuse me. So again, listen to the conversation from that place with an open mind, from the point of view that this is not absolute. This is one way of many ways of looking at it, but this is one way that I promise you, if you really, pay attention, is one way that will empower you in being aware of that addiction that may show up, from time to time. So now we feel good. Now we've established that, we feel good when we are right. That we know. It feels wonderful when you're in court and you feel right and you win that case. It feels really awesome, right, Stephen?
Right.
So why is that? Well, Judith, would argue that it's because the neurochemical mix in the brain changes. in response to being right. Our brains evolve to reward the thoughts, actions, feelings that help us survive. In this case, the brain protect us from the shame and loss of power associated with being wrong. So, take for example the amygdala, right? Part of our primitive brain, in a response to our primitive brain. It's our instinct. Our primitive brain takes that instinct in. Oh my God, I can't pronounce the word. Instinctive primitive brain that is there. It's primitive, it's called primitive brain for a reason. It was there in the primitive time to protect us from perceived fear. When we have that amygdala hijack, that means that that brain takes over. Now, we often default to that, that leads to defaulting to that fight, flee, protect, defend response. You know, that may show up in wanting to keep arguing the same point over and over and over again. Now, it's harmful because it prevents honest and productive sharing of information and opinion. And again, this is something that Judith has very openly share with me and share in her book, Conversational Intelligence. By far the most damaging, response, it's also the most common response. So again, I think we're about to take a break. You want to start thinking that, our brain responds to wanting to be right. And it's, and there's a there's a chemical change that happens the moment we are right. And it's also in response to, our desire to protect, our primitive brain desire to protect ourselves from perceived threat. And we are going to take a break. When we come back, Stephen, I want to ask you if so far this is making sense for you, because if it is, that means it's making sense for our listeners. If not, we're going to dive deeper into it. So we're going to take a break and we'll be right back. And hello, everyone, and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Elex. We are talking today about our addiction to being right, and I'm using the conversation to explore number one, the neuroscience of our brain and what happens in our brain when we are right. And before we took a break, I was asking Stephen if this made sense to him because I want to make sure that I'm not going into a deeper conversation that listeners are not going to get. So, Stephen, so far.
Yeah, I love the conversation. As I mentioned on break, it's very deep. I think it's a very intense conversation. But let me ask you something. When I was talking about my example about in court and helping this young boy, is there a way that I could have been in the same situation and had my brain hijacked in that example? Like in other words, if I don't know, like if I came out of court and was just being very arrogant about what I just accomplished, like, well, of course I did because I'm always right, and barely either spoke to my client or his mom or just said, yeah, you know, sort of made it even more about me. Like, well, you're only going back because it was me. If you had another attorney, it wouldn't be you. Is that like part of a hijack? Or, like,
absolutely.
So it is.
Yeah, because remember, one of the things you said and you explained very clearly is that when you're representing a child, you're doing what is in their best interest. But imagine, right, if instead you were going and your goal was to win because you want to look good. And you know that if you say you lose the case, your brain is going to go into, oh my God, you're going to feel shame, you're going to feel a loss of power, you're going to be humiliated. So your brain, when you start from that perspective, your brain is designed to say, oh no. We're going to be right no matter what. Because again, the primitive brain is in charge of protecting yourself from perceived threat. And that's when all that chemical, response happens in our brain. And by the way, Judith Glaser says it's all chemical. Our brain, when we're experiencing being right, our brain releases dopamine, which is that neurotransmitter associated with the brain's reward system, and adrenaline, which is that fight hormone that makes us feel dominant and it makes us feel invisible. So of course, wanting to be right, all of that happens in our brain. So it's almost like, Stephen, like how people get addicted to drugs. You may do something, or even alcohol, by the way. People have addictions because they love it so much. It makes them feel so good that then eventually they just drink it just because it makes them feel good. As opposed to you may have a glass of wine because you enjoy that glass of wine with dinner. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So again, this is about having a sense of awareness so that then you can shift that awareness. So in your case, I would say that the way you explained it, to me, it sounds, no, you're really committed to doing what's in the best interest of this child. It didn't come across as, no, you're committed to just showing up and looking good, period. Because if you don't look good, you are going to be shamed. That's the difference in this conversation. And for many of you listening, you may want to pay attention. Are you addicted to being right because you are protecting yourself from feeling shame, from feeling hurt, from feeling upset, from feeling less than? And that's where a lot of this conversation connects with that, those, what we talked about before, the significant moments, those narratives, and those life sentences that we give ourselves. Now, I told you we're going to explore two things. The next thing is, I love the book, The 3 Laws of Performance, by Steve Safran and Dave Logan. In it, they talk about, there's a section in the book that talks about what they call rackets or persistent complaints. And what I want to do is I'm going to read this very small portion of the book because I think it's really significant. If you really get both of this and that how this happens simultaneously, you'll then have access to shifting, to transforming in real time and make corrections in real time. So, 3 laws of performance. They talk about becoming aware of our rackets and taking responsibility for our rackets, which is a persistent complaint. It's one of the most important aspects in elevating performance and elevating anything. By performance, it means anything, elevating the relationships, elevating the conversations that we have, elevating the relationships that you have, whether it's with your loved ones or your colleagues. A racket has 4 elements. The first, there's an element, there's a complaint that has persisted for some time. A common one in marriages is, he's late again. My husband is late again. Notice that he's late again swirls in the wife's internal voice. The second element, there's a pattern of behavior that goes along with the complaint. So the wife is now irritated and she acts irritated, aloof, and withdrawn. I'm really mad and disappointed echoes in that internal voice. People are generally aware of these first 2 elements. So oh, he's doing that again. And again, I'm using an example of marriage, but think about things that happen in the workplace. Think about things that happen with your children or with anyone that you have ongoing communications with. So before moving on to the next 2 elements, you might notice if your performance challenge has a racket associated with it. So what's the complaint? Question mark. Maybe this isn't working, right? How many of you have complaints, this isn't working for me, or I'm not good enough, or no one is giving me the help that I need? What's the pattern of behavior that goes along with that complaint? Maybe it's acting withdrawn. Maybe it's snapping at people. Notice that the complaint and the pattern of behavior are married to one another. The complaint elicits the pattern of behavior again and again. And for some people, the pattern of behavior is so entrenched, it becomes so part of who you are that others think that's who you are. Continuing with our racket example, the third element is the payoff. And this is where the golden nugget is, for having this complaint. So these complaints persist because you get something juicy from having these complaints. So my wife gets to be right, makes her husband wrong, avoids the domination of her husband, or what occurs to her as her husband domination of being late, and lets her regain her control of the situation. The fourth element, and this is by the way, in that payoff, this is where being right, being righteous comes into play. The fourth element is the cost. When you are wanting to be right, it comes with a very heavy cost. For every payoff, there's a cost. The cost here may be that the wife loses closeness with the husband, maybe intimacy, expression, satisfaction, vitality. Think about if it's in the workplace. Think about if you have a similar dynamic with your boss or with your direct reports. What is that like going into work? Think about if you're having a similar dynamic with a loved ones, with a child, with a family member. What is that like feel for you? The payoff and the cost live in the unsaid and the unaware. In other words, they are part of those blind spots that we often talk about, the things that you don't know. Why that's powerful? Because it's powerful because this is your opportunity to start paying attention. Start paying attention. When you have that addiction of wanting to be right, ask yourself, what is this costing me? What is it costing me? Is it costing me happiness? Is it costing me fulfillment or satisfaction or joy? Is it, and then ask yourself, it's very simple. By the way, most most of my most high performing leaders, this is the one takeaway that they carry forever, and that shifts, that transforms their ability to lead, their ability to alter their lives. The next time you find yourself being right, just ask yourself, do I want to be right, or do I want to be happy? And then you choose. By the way, if you want to be right at the expense of being happy, go ahead, knock yourself out. I'm not here to argue differently. I'm not here to tell you to do differently. It's up to you. But now you know. Now you know that it's costing you significantly. Stephen, what are you hearing as I'm having this discussion?
Well, I think if, for me, listening to what you just read, if I start with, like, if I wanted to dissect what's going on with me, and if I felt like I may be in that category of just always wanting to be right or addicted to being right, I think if I started with the fourth, the cost,
Yes.
and backed into it, I mean, just when you were just talking to me, like, I just thought, my God, like, if I gave, like, if a friend took my credit card and just started going absolutely every day crazy and charging and charging and charging, and that's a cost to me. And as soon as I realized I would end it. I would call call in the credit card company, stop the card, talk to my friend, grab the card. I would do whatever I could to stop what that's costing me. And I think, if you look at that in the bigger picture or use it in different categories, like, if it's costing happiness, why wouldn't you do the same thing?
Absolutely, and that's the golden nugget, Stephen. Stephen, we need to take a break. We're gonna take a break. If you want to call us, 508-222-1320. And when we come back, we're just gonna wrap the conversation and keep diving deeper in the conversation. Hope you guys enjoying the conversation so far. We'll be right back. And hello and welcome back to Get a Grip with Coach Helix. I am your host, Coach Helix, and with me, the one and only
Stephen the Medium.
Stephen the Medium, and we're having a great conversation about our addiction to being right and how our brain is often addicted to being right. So there's an alternative to being right, and there's another hormone which makes us feel just as good as dopamine and adrenaline, and it's the hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin, when our brain releases oxytocin, we connect and bond with other people. It helps us, strengthen that connection. And it replaces dopamine and adrenaline addiction with a more productive behavior. So your goal should be to encourage the production of oxytocin in yourself and others while avoiding those spikes of cortisol and adrenaline, which, by the way, are created of that desire to being right no matter what, at least in the context of communication. So from a neuroscience perspective, you just want to learn how to shift from the dopamine adrenaline addiction to more oxytocin, to enriching that connection and bond with others. From a racket perspective, very simple, and Stephen could not have said it any better in the last segment. You just really want to begin to keep asking yourself when you find yourself wanting to be right, because being right justifies your position. It validates your point of view. It gets to make somebody else wrong. How often do we want to be right because we just want to squash the other person? But then after we do that, we're left feeling, not really that good about ourselves, because it leaves us with that sense of lacking joy or happiness, or sometimes it stresses us out. So it takes away our health, our vitality, our well-being. So ask yourself, do I want to be right? Do I want to be happy? And then choose. Just really choose. Think about one thing that's also important is think about, when you're thinking of those persistent complaints, I would invite you to start thinking about what's the source of those complaints. Where do they come from? So for me, by the way, I can tell you, one of those significant moments of my life, it's living, experiencing being a latchkey child. So I've developed all kinds of mechanisms that allow me to protect myself. Again, fifthly, protect, myself. So often, my desire, my addiction of wanting to be right comes from that place of, I just don't want to put myself in a position where somebody's going to take advantage of me. So I'd rather be right than be a victim of somebody else. But the problem with that is that there may be times where that's very appropriate, but there's many other times where that's just an old conversation that keeps playing on and on again and again, and it's costing me significantly. It's costing me happiness, vitality, health, well-being, joy, love, sometimes love for myself. So I've learned to choose in real time. Just decide, do I want to be right? Do I want to be happy? What is it that I want? So, Stephen, so far, what are you hearing here?
Well, I love the as I mentioned before, like the dimensions of being right, starting from the example I brought up of representing a kid, and that's just feeling so good and for the right reason, and then on the other side of the spectrum, like what you just explained of being right. I know for myself, and losing my dad from suicide at 8 years old, I've had a long history of being right, but it really is really fed by, if I'm not right, then I'm not good enough, and that's been something that I have struggled with my entire life. And but I will tell you, though, when I talked about dimensions, I do think that there's some times that I remember being like a number of years ago, being we went to brunch with 6 or 7 people, and one of the persons at the table I just never liked. Very very arrogant. As I'm at break, Mark was talking about what he didn't like. When people are right and they just like throw it in your face and it doesn't stop. And I think Mark's right. I mean, I know that's the other person, but this is what this person did, and I just remember having a conversation that this person brought up, and I was ready. And I got to tell you though, like walking away, I felt good.
Yeah,
I did.
and
I mean,
it may be so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it did. Maybe, but I do agree with you, Elix, because I think what you said about part of that the cost of being like having anxiety or being nervous or using energy to set myself up for that was definitely a cost.
Absolutely. And again, you get to choose.
Yeah.
It's okay. I mean, if you choose to go ahead and, knock yourself out and stick it to that person, go ahead. That's fine. I'm not saying that you shouldn't. I'm just saying that you got to evaluate and you got to decide, is this cost meaningful enough for me not to, give it away?
Yeah.
And the answer relies only on you. I mean, I have a client, it's a multimillionaire. Super successful, runs all kinds of business. He loves sticking it to people. And I told him the other day, I said, you don't get to stick it to people because you're the leader of this organization. Because he was complaining about how, people are not responding well. Well, okay, well, maybe they're not responding well because you have this addiction to have power over them. And one way to have power over them is by sticking it, even when there's no reason, but just because it makes you feel good to have power over someone. So now there's often easy to see being right is, or being addicted to being right is often easy to see in others, but it's really hard to recognize in oneself. And that speaks to our producer in one of the breaks was talking about, how he gets irritated when somebody just tries to sort of like be, stick it to you like openly in wanting to be right, and how annoying that is. So again, this conversation is not about others. This conversation is about recognizing that in ourselves. So how do you do that? So there's a few signs. There's 6 signs actually. One of them is telling someone how to do something, how it should be done, that your way is the better way, that they're not doing it right, etc. That's one way of noticing, or perhaps it may be a sign that you're just have an addiction of being right. Interpreting or diagnosing another person's thoughts, feelings, or behavior. So for example, you're passive aggressive, you just hate me, you're lazy, you don't care, you are irresponsible. Those are examples of interpreting or diagnosing somebody else's thoughts. And that's also perhaps a sign that you just have an addiction of being right and sticking it to someone else. Also appealing to logic, facts, evidence. Betty agrees with me that you're wrong. My family thinks you're too emotional. How many times, how we use those sentences to gain support that we're right and you're wrong. Most people don't blah, 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 do this. Ask anyone, they'll tell you that you're wrong, that I'm right. Or my therapist says, or it's common sense. Those, again, are, examples of perhaps a sign that you're addicted to being right. Getting amped up about an opinion, belief, or a point of view. And believe me, sometimes, especially in today's environment, it's very easy to go down that rabbit hole. And again, it may be right for you. It may be right in the moment. I'm not arguing otherwise. I'm just inviting you to just ask yourself, is this costing me? And is it costing me significantly? And is the cost, is the payoff that I'm getting, the righteousness that I'm getting, worth the cost? And you get to answer that. I'm not answering that for yourself. Defending a position, intention, what you really said, etc. When you're defending that, that's you proving that you're right and somebody else is wrong, and telling the other person what's wrong with them. including that they're the one insisting on being right. How often do we have those arguments? No, you're just trying to make me wrong about, what I think I'm right. And then, by the way, that's how, wars happen. They're two people, two countries, two groups insisting that they're both right. No, I'm right. No, you're right. No, I'm right. No, I'm right. And that's how conflict gets created. So, bottom line is how to manage the addiction of being right. So, listen with empathy. Listen with empathy. Listen with empathy. Create the opportunity for everyone involved to speak. Really listen to connect. Listen to get on somebody else's world. Don't listen to assume. Don't listen to verify your point of view. Don't listen to justify your position. Listen to get on somebody else's world. And ultimately, and perhaps the one practice that I'm inviting every single one of you to ask yourself is just ask yourself, whenever you're holding on to that position of being right, just ask yourself, do I want to be happy or do I want to be right? And then you decide. Then you choose. So always remember, the addiction to being right is a learned trait and it can be untrained. This is not who you are. This is not, what you are. This is something, it's a narrative. It's a narrative that we adopt because, again, it supports our point of view. It validates our point of view. It gets us to be right. So, Stephen, with that said, what'd you get from listening to today, being part of this conversation?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different levels that I didn't realize, and when it comes to being right, and it's something that I'll take away and which will help me going forward.
Beautiful. So we're at the top of the hour. How do people get a hold of you again, Stephen?
Stephen the Medium. Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, everywhere.
Everywhere. Awesome. And you can reach me at Coach Elix everywhere as well. You can listen to my podcast on Audible, YouTube, Spotify, and anywhere where podcasts are available. And your assignment this week is pay attention of how being right shows up in your life and then choose. With that said, everyone, Mark, thank you for being here. Everyone have a wonderful Labor Day weekend, and we'll be back with you, all of you, next week. Happy weekend, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.